Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where the sun blazes relentlessly, the sand gets everywhere, and the Nile's sluggish breeze isn't always enough to keep you from sweating through your linen tunic. Imagine walking along the dusty alleyways of ancient Thebes or Memphis, surrounded by honking donkeys, fish sellers shouting about their catch, and the ever-present smell of life, ripe, raw, and very real. You're probably already wiping your brow, right? But now, imagine doing all this while wearing heavy eyeliner, gold jewelry, and trying not to pass out from your own body odor. Welcome to the everyday funk of ancient Egypt. Spoiler alert, deodorant didn't come in a roll-on, and with no AC, no showers, and no personal bubble, let's just say, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you? Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The moment you wake up in your tiny mud brick home, you're already sweating. The sun doesn't care that it's only 7 a.m. Its golden fingers pry through the cracks in your reed window, and the heat wraps around you like a blanket soaked in warm broth. You roll off your mat, skin sticky from the night. There's no breeze. There's no relief. There's just your own scent, and your neighbors, and your donkeys. It's like living in a permanent gym locker room. But it's not just about discomfort. In ancient Egypt, body odor wasn't merely unpleasant. It was a social liability. Smelling good meant status, hygiene, and even spiritual cleanliness. Smelling bad, that could ruin your chances at love, business, or even the afterlife. Your first move of the day, not breakfast. It's deodorizing. You reach for a bowl of natron powder, a salty, soda-rich mixture scooped from a desert lake beds. It's gritty, but absorbent. You pat it under your arms and along your feet, silently praying it works today, better than yesterday. It doesn't really stop you from sweating, but it soaks it up, a little. For now, you throw on your linen tunic, light, breathable, but already stiff with salt stains. It's cleanish. Yesterday, you washed it in Nile water with a soapwort paste, but the fishy undertones never quite came out. Still, it's your best bet. Everyone smells a bit like the river here. As you step outside, the city hits you. A stew of smells, dates fermenting, garlic cooking, a camel urinating, next to a priest reciting prayers. The street vendors fan themselves with palm fronds, selling grilled onions and beer in clay jugs. It smells both delicious and disturbing. The Egyptians had an incredible sense of smell, and more importantly, they valued it. That's why even the poorest workers tried to mask their funk with something. Anything. Some chew on fresh mint. Others rub crushed lotus petals on their necks. If you're lucky, or rich, you've got access to scented oils, imported from Punt or Byblos, infused with frankincense, myrrh, or cinnamon. These aren't just for the elite. Everyone, even the laborers building the pyramids, tried to mask their natural scent. Why? Because being nose blind wasn't a thing back then. You could offend someone with just your pits. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian actually bathed daily or simply wiped down with cloths soaked in water and herbs. The Nile wasn't exactly clean, and your skin could only take so much scrubbing with sand-based pastes. Quirkier still, some Egyptians believed foul smells came from evil spirits clinging to the body. So, naturally, perfuming yourself was a spiritual act too. You weren't just freshening up, you were warding off curses. Oh, and don't forget, your love life depends on it. Ancient love poems practically beg their beloved to come near with your sweet scent, or let your fragrance stir my soul. There's no flirting without smelling halfway decent. So you, dear listener, would need to work hard to keep your stink in check. Because if you smelled bad in ancient Egypt, it wasn't just an embarrassment. It was practically a moral failing. And nobody wants to be remembered by the gods as the smelly one. You're still adjusting to the morning heat when you feel the linen tunic cling to your back. Linen. It's practically the national fabric of Egypt. And for good reason. It breathes. It's light. And most importantly, it doesn't hold on to body odor the way wool or leather would. And yes, your ancestors figured that out long before modern fashion influencers did. But let's not romanticize it too much. Linen is nice, but it's not magical. You still sweat through it, and unlike synthetic fabrics that wick moisture away, thanks, 21st century, linen just soaks it up and says, we're all in this together. If you've ever worn damp linen in the heat, you know what we mean. But back then, it was your best option. The wealthy wore ultra-fine, nearly transparent versions that shimmered in the sunlight. Basically the ancient version of wearing designer loungewear to brunch. You've got the coarse stuff. Durable, honest, slightly scratchy. Now, while you're standing in your doorway, trying not to suffocate, take a moment to consider what you didn't put on. No leather belts, no fur, no heavy sandals. Why? Because leather and fur trap heat and stink like a sauna inside a gym sock. And unless you were headed to a ceremonial festival where fashion trumped function, you'd avoid them like the plague, which, by the way, also had a smell, rotting sweet and awful. But that's a bedtime story for another time. Instead, you opt for reed sandals or go barefoot. The ancient Egyptian foot was more often covered in dust than in anything fashionable, but at least it could breathe. The soles of your feet thicken over time, earning you enough toughness to walk on hot stone without flinching. You might not have deodorant, but you are a walking miracle of adaptation. Even with your linen armor on, you're sweating. Again. So what now? Well, the clever among your people used their clothing tactically. They'd layer with linen wraps under the armpits, essentially ancient pit pads. These strips could be removed, rinsed, and replaced throughout the day. It was low-key genius, and you can imagine some entrepreneurial kid in Memphis making a fortune selling bundles of them to busy scribes or overworked priests. Historians still argue whether these underarm wraps were standard practice or reserved for the higher classes, but the evidence on tomb paintings and remains of cloth fragments suggests at least someone was using them, and you want to be that someone, because you've got errands today. One of them includes visiting a temple, which means smelling at least semi-presentable. Enter one of Egypt's fashion-forward hacks, applying scented oils directly to your linen, not your skin, your clothes. This gave you a brief moment of freshness every time you moved. A little waft here, a hint of lotus there. It didn't last long, but neither did most things in this climate, including patience. Here's a quirky twist. In some tombs, archaeologists found remnants of perfumed beads sewn into garments. That's right. Ancient Egyptians walked around in what was basically the prototype of a Febreze dryer sheet. You can almost hear the fabric whispering, "Smell me," with every breeze off the Nile. Of course, all this attention to clothing wasn't just about comfort. Smelling good meant being seen as clean, and cleanliness was a virtue in the eyes of both gods and gossipers. Your neighbors wouldn't just notice your odor, they'd judge your soul by it. And don't forget, appearances mattered even in death. Mummies were wrapped in layers of linen, each one carefully chosen, often perfumed, and sometimes embroidered. The afterlife wasn't going to smell like roses on its own. As you dodge a donkey cart and weave through market crowds, the heat rises and your armpits protest. The linen, bless it, tries its best. But you realize, like everyone else here, that surviving the stench is about layers of strategy. Not just fabric layers, but rituals, tricks, and habits passed down over generations. There's no such thing as casually throwing something on and hoping for the best. Every item you wear is chosen with odor in mind. And yet, even now, you catch a whiff of something sharp and unpleasant drifting from a man pushing fish in a basket. He glares back like he knows what you're thinking, but honestly, he's probably thinking the same about you. You're halfway to the market when you spot something odd. Women with perfectly styled wigs, sitting under a shaded awning, balancing what looks like blobs of wax on their heads. At first glance, you wonder if they've lost a bet. But no, those little cones aren't decorative. They're aromatic. And yes, they're melting. On purpose. Welcome to the sweet-smelling science of perfumed wax cones. One of ancient Egypt's most iconic odor hacks, these cones were made of animal fat or beeswax, blended with essential oils, flowers, and resins, then shaped into neat little pyramids of scent and placed atop the head, usually on top of a wig or shaven scalp. As the heat intensified, the cone would slowly liquefy, trickling down into the hair and onto the skin, releasing bursts of lotus, frankincense, or cinnamon with each drip. Gross? A little? Effective? Surprisingly, yes. If you're picturing sticky wax sliding down your face in 100-degree heat, you're not wrong. But for the Egyptians, the idea was luxurious. It was a status symbol, a sensory experience, and a religious gesture all rolled into one. If your cone was melting, it meant you could afford indulgence. You didn't just smell good. You were seen smelling good. And while most imagery shows these cones being worn at banquets, historians still argue whether they were part of everyday hygiene or ceremonial flair. Some believe the cones were real objects worn during events. Others argue they were purely symbolic, artistic representations of fragrance and status. But here's the fun part. In 2019, archaeologists finally found physical residue of these cones in a grave. proving at least some of them weren't just ancient Instagram filters. So if you were invited to a noble's dinner party, you'd definitely slap one of those cones on. Because the worst thing you could do while reclining on a cushioned mat, eating dates and roasted duck, was to ruin someone's appetite with your pits. And speaking of wigs, yes, you're wearing one too. Your head is shaved because hair traps sweat like a sponge and becomes a breeding ground for lice, bacteria, and other guests you didn't invite. Shaving was more than a style choice. It was a hygiene strategy. The elite had beautifully styled wigs made from human hair, sometimes mixed with plant fibers. The poor? They went bald and shiny. Either way, less hair, less stink. The wax cone keeps dripping as you chat with merchants and barter for onions. Every now and then, you wipe your forehead and catch the scent of blue lotus oil clinging to your skin. It's floral, earthy, with a sweet edge, and just pungent enough to distract from the rising smell of the fishmonger's stall nearby. Another strange detail: some people believed the scent from these cones had protective properties. They weren't just deodorant, they were spiritual shields. The perfume was thought to please the gods, banish bad spirits, and elevate your soul. You weren't just refreshing your body, you were tuning your essence to something higher. The cones came in many varieties. Some were designed for celebrations. Others were made specifically for mourning rituals. There's even evidence that specific blends were used during courtship. Imagine handing someone a scented cone and whispering, "Let this melt for you." Romantic, in a sweaty, ancient kind of way. And while you'd think people might tire of walking around with melting wax on their heads, the truth is, it made life a little more bearable. The perfume helped mask not only body odor, but the overwhelming stench of open drains, sweating animals, and a society where soap was a luxury. You embraced every chance you had to smell even slightly pleasant. Still, there's one drawback. By midday, your cone is nearly gone. Your wig is glossy with oil, and you've started to attract the attention of insects. Bees buzz near your ear. A fly lands in the crook of your arm. You swat them away with one hand, fan yourself with the other, and sigh. Welcome to the delicate balance of smell versus survival. By now, you've sweated through your linen. Your wax cone has dissolved into a shiny halo around your neck, and the sun's only just hit its full strength. Time for another trick from the ancient Egyptian hygiene playbook. Something surprisingly modern. Natron. You duck into the corner of a shaded courtyard, where a bowl of pale, gritty powder waits for you. Natron is magical, in a practical, slightly scratchy kind of way. It's a naturally occurring mix of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, salt, and soda ash. Basically, it's baking soda with an ancient twist. And the Egyptians used it for everything: cleaning wounds, preserving mummies, brushing teeth, washing laundry, and yes, deodorizing pits. You pinch a bit between your fingers and rub it into your armpits and under your chest. It stings a little, especially where you shaved too close with that flint razor. But the dryness it brings is instant. No artificial chemicals, no synthetic gels, just desert powder and centuries of trial and error. Kind of impressive, honestly. And don't think this was some rare luxury. Natron deposits were abundant near Wadi Natron and along dry lake beds. Even the average villager had access to a pinch or two, kept in small alabaster jars or humble clay pots. Pharaohs may have had perfumers, but you had natron, and in this heat, that's practically royalty. Historians still argue whether natron was used daily or only on special occasions. But when you live in a world where everyone's packed together in tight temples, classrooms, and marketplaces, daily seems more likely. And guess what? Some modern survivalists actually recommend baking soda as emergency deodorant. So yes, you're basically doing desert chic minimalism before it was cool. You take another handful and scrub your feet. They've already picked up a lovely blend of goat droppings and crushed garlic. The natron neutralizes the smell and leaves a slight salty film. It's gritty, sure, but it works. And for the ancient Egyptians, function always came before comfort. Now comes the fun part, mixing your own DIY deodorant paste. In one of the little jars tucked inside your linen wrap, you've got a homemade blend of natron, a few drops of frankincense oil, and animal fat, goat or crocodile, depending on what you could get this week. You warm it in your hands until it becomes soft, and then you rub it under your arms. The fragrance rises immediately, sweet, smoky, earthy. This blend was more than deodorant. It was part skincare, part perfume, part spiritual armor. Frankincense wasn't just a scent, it was a holy offering. And crocodile fat? Well, it was supposed to have protective powers. Did it smell weird? Absolutely. But if it made you seem blessed by Sobek, the crocodile god, people tended to give you a little more respect. Quirky tidbit: there are medical papyri, actual scrolls written in hieratic script, that mention deodorant recipes. One suggested mixing natron with crushed sycamore fruit and applying it daily to banish the odor of the armpits. Another claimed a combo of myrrh, resin, and date wine would make your body pleasing to the gods. It's unclear whether they worked, but hey, people were trying. You glance across the courtyard and spot a group of temple acolytes doing the same thing. Even the servants of the gods couldn't just show up smelling like last week's onions. Cleanliness was next to godliness, quite literally. Before stepping into a temple, priests had to wash several times a day, shave their entire bodies, and apply fragrant unguents. If you thought your morning routine was demanding, imagine being on deity duty. And there's an unspoken rule. If your deodorant starts to melt or fade, reapply. The rich could afford help, attendants with little alabaster jars, waiting to dab scented balm on their masters' necks or between their toes. You carry yours in a waxed pouch tied to your belt. Practical. Smells faintly like goats, but it keeps you from getting side-eyed at the spice stall. You lean back against the cool wall, letting the paste dry, and for a moment, you feel fresh. Not perfume commercial fresh, but good enough to pass for someone who's got their life together. You smell of resin and sun-warmed sand, with just a hint of determination, which, in this society, is the best scent of all. As the heat continues to rise, and the market buzz turns into a chorus of tired bargaining, you slip away toward a quieter courtyard. It's time for what might be the most underestimated part of your daily odor battling routine. Your armpits. Yes, in ancient Egypt, the humble armpit was treated with serious attention. Like ritual level, serious. You sit on a low stone bench, pull a small copper mirror from your satchel, and get to work. First, you take out a slender pair of bronze tweezers, polished smooth from use, and begin the meticulous task of plucking. No shaving here. Plucking meant less irritation, fewer cuts, and smoother results. And yes, you wince with every hair. But hair removal wasn't just about aesthetics or smooth selfies. Obviously, it was a full-on hygiene practice. Hair traps sweat. Sweat becomes stink. Stink is social death. So, out the hairs go. Historians still argue whether hair removal rituals were practiced by everyone or limited to priests and the upper class, but murals and grave goods suggest it was widespread. Tweezers have been found in tombs, in workers' quarters, and even in desert outposts. That tells you something. No one wanted to walk around smelling like fermented onion soup. Once your underarms are as bald as a baby ibis, you reach for your second tool, the oil pot. Inside is a blend of moringa oil and a touch of crushed marjoram. This isn't just fragrance, it's antiseptic. It soothes the skin, kills odor-causing bacteria, and leaves behind a subtle herbal scent that floats on the air every time you raise your arms, which, let's be honest, you try not to do too often anyway. You dab it on gently with a linen cloth, watching for any signs of irritation. If things go south, like a rash or a heat blister, you've got a backup remedy. Crushed lotus root and honey, mixed into a paste. You apply it to the skin and let it rest in the shade for a while. Modern spa day energy, ancient edition. And here's where things get spiritual. There was a belief in ancient Egypt that the armpits, yes, the armpits, were places where evil spirits could enter or linger. Smelly armpits? A sign of spiritual imbalance. That's why rituals were developed, not just for cleanliness, but for purification. Some priests even blessed the oils they used before applying them. You weren't just masking odor, you were sealing your aura. You lift your arms slightly, sniff, and nod with approval, fresh enough to pass through a crowded prayer line without offending the gods. But just to be sure, you take out a tiny pouch of powdered myrrh and give your underarms a little tap. A dusting of resin can absorb moisture, provide a hint of scent, and double as an offering to divine noses. And here's a quirky detail. Some noble women carried tiny perfume pouches under their arms, not on their belts, but literally tucked into the armpit folds of their linen dresses. A mix of talc, crushed flowers, and gum arabic. These scent sachets were hidden, but powerful, subtle, elegant, functional, and occasionally stuck to your ribs. If you sweat too hard, you step back out into the sun, skin tingling slightly from the oils and grooming. A bead of sweat runs down your temple, but you barely notice it. Your armpits feel cool, dry, and blessedly fragrant. You pass a young man who nods in admiration. Not at your tunic, not at your sandals, but at the sweet marjoram wafting behind. You like a scented comet. Smelling good in ancient Egypt was like wearing invisible armor. It shielded you from judgment, from gossip, from bad omens. It made you feel dare we say, empowered. And you're not alone in that. Even commoners with no time for tweezers would use bitter herbs or scrub with sand to keep their pits clean. Some villagers swore by a homemade lotion of sour milk and mint. Was it pleasant? No, but according to legend, one particularly handsome stonemason had 6 wives, thanks to his minty fresh underarms. Was that true? Historians still argue about the details, but the story lives on, because in ancient Egypt, the armpit wasn't just a body part, it was a battleground. And you, my friend, are winning. You are halfway through your daily rounds when you pass a group of young boys, heads freshly shaved, their smooth scalps glinting in the sun. They're laughing, tossing pebbles, and not a single strand of hair gets in the way. Practical, absolutely. Stylish? Depends on who you ask. But one thing's for sure, bald was beautiful, especially in ancient Egypt. Hair, as lovely as it might look on a limestone bust, had one major downside. It held on to sweat, oil, dust, and worst of all, smell. In a land where the thermometer only knows hotter, hair was basically a personal swamp on your head. That's why both men and women often chose to shave completely. Heads, bodies, everything. It wasn't just about staying cool. It was a full-body hygiene strategy. No hair meant fewer lice, fewer odor pockets, and easier application of scented oils. And in the religious world, cleanliness equaled purity. Temple priests shaved multiple times per week, often with help, because missing a patch could be considered disrespectful to the gods. You remember your own shaving ritual. Early morning, squatting near a polished bronze dish of water, gripping a curved copper blade. No shaving cream, just a mix of water, natron, and prayers for steady hands. And when you nick your scalp, which you always do, you dab it with crushed acacia to stop the bleeding. Burns a little, smells like tree bark, totally worth it. Wigs, then, weren't vanity. They were a solution for special occasions or even just social outings. You'd slap on a stylish wig made from human hair, wool, or even plant fibers, depending on your social rank and budget. Wealthy elites had multiple wigs, long, braided ones for ceremonies, short, curled ones for casual dinners, and scented ones for, well, romantic encounters. Some were laced with beeswax and perfumed oils, turning your head into a walking bouquet. And here's where things get clever. Those wax cones we talked about earlier, they worked best on wigs. The wax melted more slowly through the hair strands, distributing scent without leaving your real skin greasy. Bonus, wigs could be washed more easily than your own hair, especially with lotus soap or natron scrubs. Historians still argue whether wigs were worn daily by the average person, or if they were mostly ceremonial. But fragments of wigs have been found in tombs of modest citizens, not just nobles. So, either way, it was something to aspire to. Smelling good started from the top down. There's also a curious belief that the gods themselves preferred baldness. Some depictions of priests and god kings show them hairless, glowing and glistening with oil, symbols of divine cleanliness. Being bald didn't make you holy, but it sure made you easier to bless. You pause in front of a water seller's stall, where a young woman is adjusting her short, honey-colored wig. She looks over and smirks, probably catching the scent of your own oil blend, some mix of cinnamon, cardamom, and moringa. You both know the dance. No words, just a whiff, a nod, and an unspoken understanding. You put in the effort. Meanwhile, behind her, a worker stumbles by, dripping with sweat, curls stuck to his forehead. He doesn't have time for wigs or oils. He's got a different trick, a head wrap soaked in lotus water. It drips down his temples and catches just enough breeze to cool his skull. Is it fancy? No. Does it help? Absolutely. Even children get in on the action. You've seen them with shaved heads, save for one long braid. The sidelock of youth, sometimes perfumed and tied with bright ribbons. A combination of tradition and hygiene keeps the scalp breezy and mom happy. But it's not all functional. Some wigs were art, intricately braided, dyed black with indigo or even blue lotus extract, and adorned with tiny gold clips or perfume beads. Wearing one was a statement, and the richer you were, the stronger that statement smelled. You remember one noble's funeral procession, where the entire courtyard filled with the scent of cedarwood and honey, just from the wigs of the mourners. A fragrant farewell. Literally, that scent clung to the stone walls for days. So, as you adjust your own short wig and feel the cool shadow it casts over your brow, you realize ancient Egypt didn't leave body odor to chance. From the scalp to the soles, every inch of skin had a plan. And with your shaved head and sweet-smelling strands, you're not just surviving the heat, you're styling through it. The midday sun is unforgiving now, pouring heat like molten gold over every stone, every alleyway, every inch of your skin. Your neck is sticky, your sandals are filled with dust, and the Nile glistens temptingly in the distance. You head toward it, not for a dramatic swim, but for something even more essential, a proper wash. Bathing in ancient Egypt wasn't what you might expect. There were no porcelain tubs, no fluffy towels, and certainly no scented bath bombs. But make no mistake, cleanliness was a daily ritual. You grab a small clay jar from your satchel, filled with a thick paste made from crushed soapwort root and a hint of natron. It's gritty, it's earthy, and it works. You squat near a communal basin or perhaps a stepped platform that leads into a private courtyard's water cistern, if you're lucky enough to know someone with one. If not, there's always the Nile. You strip down to your linen, underwrap, and begin the process. Face, arms, underarms, chest, legs. The paste foams slightly when mixed with warm water, which you scoop with a smooth gourd shell. This isn't about soaking, it's about scrubbing. Clean body, clear conscience, especially when you've spent the morning marinating in sweat and social pressure. Historians still argue whether most Egyptians bathed once a day or more, but the written records and artwork suggest that bathing was a cultural expectation, not just a luxury. Tomb inscriptions even mention bathing as one of the joys of life, and it wasn't limited to the rich. From fishermen to scribes, everyone found time to rinse off. You might even splash on a bit of lotus water or rub your skin with a coarse linen cloth dipped in diluted vinegar to remove buildup. Think of it as ancient exfoliation, with a hint of salad dressing. Now, the Nile, Egypt's lifeline, played a big role here. If you lived nearby, you'd probably dip in its shallows every morning or evening. But don't picture a refreshing spa moment. Picture slippery rocks, fish nipping at your toes, and a healthy paranoia about crocodiles. Still, the water was sacred. It wasn't just a bath, it was a blessing. But if you were further from the Nile or lived in a crowded urban center, you made do with buckets, jars, and foot basins. Entire households shared washing stations. You learned to get clean with as little water as possible. And if you were part of the elite, you might even have a servant pour warmed water over you while you reclined on a low bench. Basically, a human faucet. Here's a quirky detail. Some Egyptians bathed with beer, or at least beer sediment. Leftover barley mash could be rubbed on the skin to remove grime and odor. Did it leave you smelling like a tavern? Probably. But your skin felt amazing. And honestly, sometimes that's enough. One awkward challenge, drying off. There were no terry cloth towels, just thin, sun-bleached linen cloths, or simply air drying in the heat. You stand in the shade, arms outstretched, the breeze rolling over your damp skin like a soft whisper. It's one of the rare moments in your day that feels truly quiet. A nearby boy carries a jar filled with rose water. He's delivering it to a noble's home, where it will be poured into a marble basin for rinsing after meals. That's right. Some people wash their hands and faces multiple times per day, often with scented water, just to keep the day's odors at bay. Overkill? Maybe. But can you really blame them? And don't forget, water itself was a spiritual element. To cleanse your body was to honor the gods. Ritual purification was required before prayer, before entering temples, before handling sacred items. You weren't just washing off sweat. You were resetting your soul. Now you dip your feet into a basin, the water swirling with bits of mint and papyrus leaves. It tingles. You close your eyes for a second. The scent of the leaves rises gently, masking the faint funk of city life and fish guts from earlier. In that moment, you realize something. The Egyptians may not have had showers, but they had systems. They understood that to live in harmony with the gods, your neighbors, and even your own reflection, you had to cleanse, scent, and repeat. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. As the afternoon stretches on, and the scent of spiced bread wafts through the air, you find yourself entering a temple courtyard. The temperature here drops just slightly, thanks to thick stone walls and shaded colonnades. But the real change is in the air. It smells divine, literally, because here in ancient Egypt, smell was sacred, and every temple had its signature fragrance. You inhale deeply, frankincense, myrrh, maybe a trace of cedar or cinnamon. You're not just surrounded by holy architecture, you're bathed in aroma. The Egyptians believed that the gods could smell offerings, not metaphorically, literally. A good scent wasn't just pleasant, it was a form of worship. Burnt incense? That was a hotline to the heavens. Perfumed oils? That was your soul saying, "Hey, I'm trying my best down here." Each deity had their own olfactory preference. Hathor, goddess of beauty and love, was often associated with blue lotus and sweet myrrh. Ra, the sun god, favored the bright, clean scent of frankincense, something sharp enough to cut through the heat and chase away evil. And Osiris, earthier tones, like cedar and patchouli, fit his underworld vibes. You kneel beside a low altar and watch as a priest grinds resin into powder, adding it to a burning cone on a ceramic tray. The smoke curls upward in slow spirals, clinging to your skin and hair, infusing your tunic with a scent that lingers for hours. This isn't passive incense. This is ritual deodorant for the soul. But you also notice something else. The priest himself smells incredible. Not overwhelmingly so, just enough that when he walks past, you catch a whiff of something spicy, woody, almost warm. It's likely a blend of sacred oils, reserved for temple use only, applied after multiple purification rituals. That scent tells everyone, I've walked with the gods. Try to keep up. Historians still argue whether temple perfumes were used daily or saved for feast days, but evidence suggests that fragrance played a role in nearly every religious ceremony. There are scrolls that describe multi-step anointing rituals: head, chest, arms, feet, all marked with specific oils. The belief was that the body had spiritual entry points, and scent could seal them against evil. Quirky detail. In some temples, attendants were assigned solely to manage the incense fires. Their job wasn't to chant or bless. They were the perfumers, the ones who kept the divine noses happy. Imagine your entire job being director of scent. As you rise, a temple worker offers you a dab of holy oil on a reed stick. You accept gratefully and trace it behind your ears. It tingles. It smells of neroli and something darker, maybe henna. Whatever it is, it lingers with dignity. Outside the temple, you see a different side of scent. In marketplaces, perfumers chant out their inventory like auctioneers. Lotus for love, myrrh for protection, cinnamon for courage. Their stalls are stacked with little alabaster jars, some sealed with wax, others open and bubbling in the sun. You stop to sample one called Breath of Bastet. It's floral with a hint of musk, and oddly, it makes you feel braver. Could be psychological, could be magic. Either way, you buy a dab with 2 bronze deben and carefully press it to your neck. And don't think only humans were pampered. Statues of gods were also perfumed daily. Priests would wash them, apply oils, dress them in fresh linen, and perfume them just like a living person. These statues weren't just symbols. They were believed to be living vessels of divine energy, and living beings deserved to smell amazing. You recall hearing about a golden shrine of Amun that was said to smell so strongly of incense that visitors emerged from the chamber with their clothes reeking of heaven. That's legacy. That's branding. Even the process of making perfumes was semi-mystical. Recipes were passed down in temple libraries, treated like sacred texts. Ingredients came from across the known world: cinnamon from the Levant, myrrh from a Punt, spikenard from Nubia. To blend a perfume was to master earth and spirit in one vial. So, as you leave the temple, your skin carrying whispers of divinity, your underarms still holding onto your morning moringa oil, and your mind wrapped in incense haze, you realize something. To smell good in Egypt wasn't just about vanity. It was a sign you'd touched something eternal. You step away from the temple, still wrapped in the ghost of sacred incense, when the unmistakable scent of something off hits your nose. You glance sideways. It's coming from a cosmetic stall near the alley. Jars of unguents, clays, and something that smells suspiciously like burnt toast. The vendor waves you over eagerly, gesturing toward one of the more questionable items on display. Crocodile dung. Yes, you heard that right. Welcome to one of the more colorful entries in Egypt's Hygiene Hall of Fame, because while much of the ancient fragrance game was elegant, some practices were, well, let's just say experimental, and crocodile dung featured prominently in several beauty and hygiene treatments. Not necessarily because it smelled good, obviously, but because it was believed to be powerful. Take, for instance, skincare. A mixture of crocodile dung and honey was once used as a face mask. Why? Because both were considered purifying. Honey had antimicrobial properties, and dung, well, it had mystical ones. Some believed it warded off illness, others thought it protected against evil spirits, and some just figured if it didn't kill you, it must be doing something right. Historians still argue whether these dung-based treatments were truly common or just the quirks of elite experimentation. But the fact that recipes survive in medical papyri suggests they weren't exactly fringe. And remember, this is the same civilization that invented eye makeup and embalming fluid. They weren't squeamish. You watch as the vendor scoops a bit of the brown paste into a lotus-shaped container. It's mixed with crushed mint leaves, probably to take the edge off, and offered to a curious woman in a finely pleated linen robe. She sniffs it, hesitates, and applies a dot to her cheek. Bold. Not everything here is so fragrant. Beside the dung mask is a selection of fragrance balls, small, waxy orbs containing oils, resin, and crushed flowers. Some are wrapped in papyrus leaves and tied with twine. These were ancient Egypt's answer to solid perfume. You'd tuck one into your clothing, or crush it between your fingers and rub the essence onto your pulse points. You pick up one labeled Bastard's Whisper and give it a sniff. It's heavy on spikenard, with a background of pine and something citrusy. You buy it on impulse. After all, who doesn't want to smell like a cat goddess on a good day? Then, there are the kohl jars. Dark eyeliner, yes, but also part of the hygiene system. Kohl wasn't just for looks. It helped reduce glare from the sun and repel insects. Some believed it also neutralized unpleasant odors rising from the eyes, nose, or even the spirit. A swipe of kohl was a swipe against chaos. You spot a basket of dried herbs labeled apron sachets. Curious, you ask the vendor. Turns out they were used exactly how it sounds, tied around the waist or under the tunic to mask lower body odors. A blend of anise, marjoram, and thyme, homemade, affordable, and surprisingly effective in a land where undergarments weren't really a thing. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women used onion juice as a foot wash, believing it helped with sweat and odor. Did it smell like a salad? Definitely. But apparently, it kept the feet clean, and the suitors oddly interested. No one knows why. You walk further down the street, now fully immersed in the wild, creative, and often confusing world of Egyptian beauty science. Every jar you pass as a mixture of medicine, magic, and maybe a little guesswork. Some are sweet, some are sour, and some, well, let's just say you wouldn't want to wear them on a date. But even in the strangest recipes, there's a shared intent to manage the human smell. Egypt was hot, crowded, and intimate. People didn't have the luxury of hiding, so they masked, mingled, and managed the best they could, with everything from lotus balm to crocodile poop. And weirdly, it kind of worked. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the Nile in molten gold, you find yourself pausing at a shaded bench beneath a sycamore fig tree. The air is still warm, but a gentle breeze rolls in, just enough to carry the scent of roasted dates, crushed flowers, and something oddly sharp. It's a breath, not of wind, but of a passerby's mouth. Ah, yes, breath. We've talked a lot about the pits, the wigs, and even the sacred armpit rituals. But if you really wanted to smell good in ancient Egypt, you couldn't forget your mouth, because no matter how well perfumed your clothes were, one whispered conversation could ruin everything. So what did ancient Egyptians do to keep their breath as fresh as their gods? For starters, they didn't just eat to live, they ate to smell better. You reach into your own satchel and pull out a small linen pouch of fennel seeds. You chew a few. They're earthy, slightly sweet, and just a bit bitter. Fennel was a go-to ancient breath freshener. Not only did it mask odors, but Egyptians believed it improved digestion, which they also linked to body scent. Then there's cinnamon, cardamom, and cloves, spices you've likely encountered in ritual oils, but also tucked into small pouches and chewed after meals. The wealthy even commissioned special mouth pastes made from these spices, crushed into a base of honey and natron. It wasn't quite toothpaste, but it came close. You pull out a little wooden stick. It's a chew stick, cut from the arak tree or a frayed piece of palm. You bite one end and chew it until it softens into a fibrous brush, then gently scrape your teeth and gums. It's not glamorous, but it works. Modern miswak users still swear by it. And guess what? Archaeologists have uncovered instructions in medical papyri for these exact oral hygiene routines. One recipe calls for powdered mint, iris petals, and rock salt. Another includes burnt ostrich eggshells, which you'd rather not try. Historians still argue whether these oral care rituals were common across the lower classes or mostly reserved for scribes and priests. But given how many chew sticks have been found and the emphasis on purity of speech in religious life, it's likely that at least some form of mouth maintenance was routine for many. Here's a quirky tidbit. Bad breath was seen as more than just unpleasant. It could be interpreted as a sign of spiritual imbalance or moral decay. In some texts, demons are described as having foul breath, while the righteous are described as smelling sweet, like the lotus. So, yes, if your breath smelled bad, you might not just be gross. You might be cursed. You take a sip from a ceramic flask of barley water, light, slightly sour, and a good palate cleanser. Alcoholic drinks like beer were common, but many Egyptians balanced them with herbal teas, mint infusions, or water steeped with herbs to keep their mouths and breath more agreeable. You hear two merchants chatting nearby, laughing over something. One pauses, pulls out a stick of dried resin, probably mastic or frankincense, and pops it in his mouth. Not to eat, to chew. It works like ancient gum, releasing oils that cleaned the teeth and freshened breath. And this wasn't just personal hygiene, it was aura management. The Egyptians believed your scent, whether from skin, mouth, or clothing, was part of your presence. A well-scented person projected health, intelligence, and favor with the gods. A foul-smelling one? Disgrace, shame, even suspicion. You think of your last festival, when a singer leaned in close to the high priest to whisper a hymn, and everyone noticed how his breath smelled like cinnamon and honey. People talked about it for days, not just because he sang well, but because he had clearly prepared. You adjust your tunic, spit out the used chew stick end, and pop in a bit of parsley. It's cooling, clean, and subtle. You smile. Breath, handled. Skin, oiled. Armpits, blessed. At this point, you're practically divine. And that's the beauty of it. Every part of you could be managed, masked, or transformed into something sweeter. Even your mouth, especially your mouth, because in ancient Egypt, the way you smelled was often the way you were remembered. The sky deepens into a dusty rose as twilight settles across the rooftops, and the air, for the first time today, begins to cool. You head toward home, winding through narrow alleys, when you catch a sudden, delicate trace of something floral, not from the breeze, not from a person passing. It's coming from inside a tomb. Yes, this is one of those moments where history really messes with your sense of time, because even thousands of years later, archaeologists entering sealed Egyptian tombs have reported catching a faint trace of perfume, real scent molecules surviving the millennia, ancient perfumes that still smell. You stop before a small family shrine. It's simple, quiet, and lovingly cared for. A clay jar sits atop it, sealed with beeswax. Inside, a lump of solid perfume made from myrrh, cinnamon, lotus resin, and fat, probably goat or cow. The formula was so effective that when similar containers were discovered in royal tombs, their scent remained trapped within. That's how seriously the Egyptians took scent preservation. It wasn't just about daily freshness. It was about being fragrant in eternity. If you could smell sweet in the afterlife, it meant you had left the world whole, loved, honored, worth remembering. You run a finger along the lip of the jar and think back to a story you once heard of how, when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, the scent of lotus and unguent filled the chamber, a 3,000-year-old perfume still lingering in the wrappings of the boy king. His personal scent, a kind of olfactory fingerprint, wafting through time like a message from the dead. Historians still argue how much of that scent was real and how much was myth, but the recipes for these perfumes are real enough. Some include dozens of ingredients: juniper berries, balsam, onion oil, even burnt animal hair for smoky undertones. Yes, really. You pass by a small incense vendor, and he nods at you, gesturing to a fresh batch of quirky, the most famous perfume of them all, made with wine, raisins, honey, myrrh, cinnamon, mint, frankincense, and other secret ingredients. Kaifi wasn't just worn. It was burned as incense, drank as medicine, and used as a balm. Some versions took weeks to prepare. Quirky fact, certain temples had dedicated perfume laboratories. One in Edfu even has carved recipes on its stone walls. Think of it like an ancient Glossier pop-up, except the customers were priests and the target audience was gods. You ask the vendor for a sliver of solid kai-fi paste. He cuts a piece and presses it into waxed linen. You sniff. It's sweet, spicy, with a medicinal warmth that blooms on contact. The scent settles around you like a soft cloak. The truth is, these perfumes weren't just luxurious, they were powerful tools. They helped with sleep, reduced anxiety, treated headaches, and most of all, masked the eternal realities of living in a hot, crowded, and very human society. And when you lay down at night, yes, even then, the smell mattered. Many Egyptians scented their bed linens with floral oils or placed sachets of dried herbs beneath their pillows. They believed it brought good dreams, kept away evil spirits, and comforted the soul as it wandered the dream world. Even now, as the stars begin to appear and you walk home beneath a sky you share with your ancestors, you feel it. Scent as memory, scent as identity, scent as legacy. You might not be a pharaoh. You might not be embalmed with 1,000 oils or wrapped in gold-laced linens, but the choices you made today, the oils, the herbs, the pastes, the scrubs, tie you to the same instinct, to live clean, to be remembered well, to leave behind something that still lingers, long after you're gone. The sky deepens into a dusty rose as twilight settles across the rooftops, and the air, for the first time today, begins to cool. You head toward home, winding through narrow alleys, when you catch a sudden, delicate trace of something floral, not from the breeze, not from a person passing. It's coming from inside a tomb. Yes, this is one of those moments where history really messes with your sense of time, because even thousands of years later, archaeologists entering sealed Egyptian tombs have reported catching a faint trace of perfume, real scent molecules surviving the millennia, ancient perfumes that still smell. You stop before a small family shrine. It's simple, quiet, and lovingly cared for. A clay jar sits atop it, sealed with beeswax. Inside, a lump of solid perfume made from myrrh, cinnamon, lotus resin, and fat, probably goat or cow. The formula was so effective that when similar containers were discovered in royal tombs, their scent remained trapped within. That's how seriously the Egyptians took scent preservation. It wasn't just about daily freshness, it was about being fragrant in eternity. If you could smell sweet in the afterlife, it meant you had left the world whole, loved, honored, worth remembering. You run a finger along the lip of the jar and think back to a story you once heard of how, when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, the scent of lotus and unguent filled the chamber, a 3,000-year-old perfume still lingering in the wrappings of the boy king, his personal scent, a kind of olfactory fingerprint, wafting through time like a message from the dead. Historians still argue how much of that scent was real and how much was myth, But the recipes for these perfumes are real enough. Some include dozens of ingredients: juniper berries, balsam, onion oil, even burnt animal hair for smoky undertones. Yes, really. You pass by a small incense vendor, and he nods at you, gesturing to a fresh batch of kai-fi, the most famous perfume of them all, made with wine, raisins, honey, myrrh, cinnamon, mint, frankincense, and other secret ingredients. Kai-fi wasn't just worn. It was burned as incense, drank as medicine, and used as a balm. Some versions took weeks to prepare. Quirky fact: certain temples had dedicated perfume laboratories. One in Edfu even has carved recipes on its stone walls. Think of it like an ancient Glossier pop-up, except the customers were priests and the target audience was gods. You ask the vendor for a sliver of solid kai-fi paste. He cuts a piece and presses it into waxed linen. You sniff. It's sweet, spicy, with a medicinal warmth that blooms on contact. The scent settles around you like a soft cloak. The truth is, these perfumes weren't just luxurious. They were powerful tools. They helped with sleep, reduced anxiety, treated headaches, and most of all, masked the eternal realities of living in a hot, crowded, and very human society. And when you lay down at night, yes, even then, the smell mattered. Many Egyptians scented their bed linens with floral oils, or placed sachets of dried herbs beneath their pillows. They believed it brought good dreams, kept away evil spirits, and comforted the soul as it wandered the dream world. Even now, as the stars begin to appear, and you walk home beneath a sky you share with your ancestors, you feel it, scent as memory, scent as identity, scent as legacy. You might not be a pharaoh. You might not be embalmed with 1,000 oils or wrapped in gold-laced linens, but the choices you made today, the oils, the herbs, the pastes, the scrubs, tie you to the same instinct: to live clean, to be remembered well, to leave behind something that still lingers long after you're gone. Morning returns, early and relentless. The kind of morning where the heat creeps in before the light does, and you wake up already sweating. But today, as you stretch and rise from your mat, you reach for something different: a handful of dried herbs from your food pouch. Because while oils and pastes and powders help mask odor, the Egyptians knew something you're just beginning to appreciate. What you eat changes how you smell. You chew slowly on a sprig of parsley and a few fennel seeds left over from yesterday. The taste is bright, almost peppery. These aren't just flavorings. They're natural deodorants, believed to freshen breath and sweeten body odor from the inside out. It's an idea that modern science still studies, but the Egyptians were already chewing their way toward better body chemistry. Some even swore by lettuce, which was sacred to the fertility god Min, but also believed to cool the blood and reduce pungency. Raw onions, another staple, were a mixed bag, valued for strength and endurance, but not exactly helping your personal aroma. Garlic, too, was loved and feared. You ate it for protection, but if you had an important meeting or a date, you might skip it. And speaking of dates, those sweet, sticky fruits were more than just dessert. They were considered odor neutral, providing energy without turning your sweat into something you'd regret. You pop one into your mouth now. It's chewy and honey-like. It also keeps you regular, which, let's face it, probably helped a lot with digestion-related odor situations. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian consciously tailored their diet for smell, or if this knowledge lived more in the realm of healer lore. But ancient medical texts do mention avoiding heating foods before temple service or fasting on water and herbs to prepare for rituals. There's even a curious little myth about a priest who, after eating too many onions, was struck mute by the gods until he purified his body with mint tea and silence. Probably not true, but enough to make you reach for mint instead of meat on festival days. You open your pantry, well, your woven reed basket, and sort through your food: barley cakes, lentils, leeks, dried figs. The figs are safe. The leeks? Not unless you're planning to work alone all day. You remember hearing about scented wines too. Some nobles infused their drinks with cinnamon, lotus, or myrrh, not just for taste, but to change the way their bodies smelled after digestion. It wasn't just consumption, it was internal perfume. And yes, it worked both ways. Certain foods made people rank. Fish, for instance, especially in the southern regions during the hot months, could ruin your personal aura for a full day. Workers in fish markets or pickling houses had to apply extra oils just to get through a temple gate. Quirky detail: there was a belief that eating too much red meat, a rarity but still possible for the elite, could cause the scent of decay to seep from your pores. Some healers claimed to smell disease before symptoms appeared, diagnosing patients with internal rot just by their sweat. You reach for your water jug. It's filled not just with water, but steeped with mint, chamomile, and lemon balm. You sip slowly. It cools your throat, clears your palate, and leaves behind a clean, almost floral aftertaste. Because the truth is, the Egyptians didn't separate eating from smelling. To nourish your body was to sculpt your scent. And your scent, it was your handshake, your first impression, your silent prayer, your reputation. Even now, as you finish breakfast and prepare to face another day in the sun, you know your choices. Food, drink, herbs will follow you, not just in your stomach, but in the way your body will breathe itself into the world. And if you're lucky, maybe someone will pass you in the market today and say, "You smell like someone the gods would approve of." Later that day, you find yourself hunched over a shallow stone basin in the shade, a small wooden spoon in one hand and a lump of creamy, floral-scented paste in the other. This isn't food. It's your personal blend of animal fat and flour, essence, the ancient Egyptian version of body butter, perfume, and moisturizer rolled into one. You smear a bit of the mixture between your palms and rub it into your arms, chest, and neck. The scent rises slowly, sweet, almost heady. It's made from goose fat, the only kind you could afford, blended with petals from blue lotus and marjoram, pounded and soaked for days in warm oil before being mashed into the fat. The result? A balm that makes your skin glisten and smell like something far more luxurious than your wallet suggests. This practice wasn't exclusive to the rich. Even laborers on the pyramids were recorded receiving fat-based ointments as part of their wages, not just for fragrance, but to soothe cracked skin and help prevent sunburn and infections. It was medicine and magic and maintenance in one. The wealthy, of course, took things further. They used beeswax, more stable in the sun, and infused it with imported resins like myrrh, cinnamon bark, or cardamom oil. These pastes were stored in alabaster jars and applied by handmaids or professional attendants. One nobleman's tomb even featured a painting of him being massaged head to toe with a blend of cedarwood oil and crushed lilies. Imagine smelling like a forest and a bouquet all at once. Historians still argue whether these fat and flower pastes were daily use or reserved for ceremonies. But the number of jars found in household remains suggests they were more common than we think. And really, would you want to go a single day in this heat without something to soften your skin and disguise the sweat? Yeah, no thanks. You dab a bit behind your ears, where scent lingers longest, then under your arms, where scent needs to linger least. The balm melts slightly on contact, forming a light film that traps fragrance and holds it steady throughout the day. Not quite an antiperspirant, but as close as you'll get without modern chemistry. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some flower fat blends were dyed with ochre or malachite, adding a subtle tint to the skin. Think ancient bronzer or blush, with the added bonus of smelling like marigolds. Some even used powdered gold flecks for special occasions. A walking sunbeam, basically. You rub the last of the paste into your feet, cracked from sand, worn from walking, and hungry for softness. The fat seals the skin. The floral oils hide the underlying mustiness. And just like that, you're ready to be seen in public again. As you stand, you catch your reflection in a polished copper mirror. There you are, skin glowing, scent rising gently, clothing light and clean. You might not have a pyramid to your name, but you look like someone worth carving on a wall. And you're not alone in this little ritual. All across the city, people are anointing themselves before meetings, before offerings, before meals, before bed. The act of rubbing fragrance into the skin was almost spiritual. It was affection. It was pride. It was, in a way, a conversation with yourself. Even mummies weren't spared. Bodies were rubbed with similar balms during embalming, sometimes so much that they were practically saturated. One particularly well-preserved mummy from the New Kingdom still gave off a faint, woody scent when unwrapped over 3,000 years later. So you tuck your balm back into its pouch, careful not to let the sun melt it completely. You'll reapply later, before dinner. For now, you carry that layered scent of fat and flower-like armor, soft, fragrant, intentional armor. Because in Egypt, the body wasn't just a vehicle, it was a canvas. And you've just painted yours with a signature scent. As the afternoon sun tilts toward evening, you find yourself near the temple again, not as a visitor this time, but as an observer. A line of temple servants file past you, each one draped in a bleached linen, skin slick with oil, and heads freshly shaved. They smell incredible. You catch hints of sweet myrrh, honeyed cedar wood, maybe even spikenard. These aren't just clean people. These are hierarchically scented people. That's right. Fragrance in Egypt wasn't just about hygiene. It was about status. Your scent was a signal to the gods, to your superiors, and to your neighbors, the priests and high officials of the temple. They had access to rare imported oils, some of which cost as much as livestock. They didn't just smell good, they smelled expensive. Every layer of scent, frankincense, lotus, cinnamon, and kaifi, was a declaration of rank, refinement, and religious privilege. You, on the other hand, as an average citizen, wore a more modest profile. Marjoram, moringa, mint, maybe some thyme or lemongrass. If you knew someone with a garden, it still smelled pleasant, sure, but no one was mistaking you for a high priest with access to divine ointments. This was no accident. In fact, who got to smell like what was tightly controlled? Certain perfumes were reserved for ritual use only. Some were restricted to certain castes. Others were so sacred, their recipes were locked away in temple libraries. You couldn't just dab yourself with temple-grade kaifi and call it a day, unless you were ready to offend both deity and bureaucracy. Historians still argue how strictly these scent boundaries were enforced, but temple records suggest that guards were assigned to manage the flow of incense, who could receive it, how much, and when. Imagine a perfume ration system. Welcome to ancient scent politics. Meanwhile, the servants at your local noble's estate, they had their own scent codes too. You recall walking past a row of kitchen workers once, all of them wearing little clay scent beads strung around their necks, cheap and cheerful, infused with dried sage and occasionally lemon balm. Why? Because no one wanted the smell of onions and fish lingering on the dinnerware. There was even a word for it, nefer, meaning both beautiful and good smelling. To be nefer was to be pleasant to look at and to be near. So if you were a housekeeper or a nursemaid or a scribe, part of your job was managing your scent. It wasn't optional, it was professional. Here's a quirky twist. Elite children were sometimes rubbed with specific oil blends to train their scent identity from an early age. Imagine your parents choosing your future perfume profile based on your astrology chart. You're a Leo, definitely myrrh, forward with hints of clove. You chuckle, but it's not far off. You remember the son of a merchant who always smelled like sweet resin and milk. Even as a child, he seemed otherworldly. Turned out, his mother had bartered for a priest's discarded balm jars. You still think about that scent sometimes. But back to the temple steps. One of the priests walks past you, and his aroma is complex. You catch layers. First a sharp note, probably galbanum, followed by a softer swell of lotus and some kind of wood, likely sandalwood. He nods once in your direction. It's not just acknowledgement. It's a silent statement. You smell me. You know who I am. You respond with your own subtle scent. A touch of marjoram, warmed by your skin, carried by the breeze. It's no royal mixture, but it's honest, clean, human. And in Egypt, that still counts. Because even if you weren't born into oils and incense, you learned early that fragrance was a language, and everyone, rich or poor, spoke it, some with whispers of mint and sweat, others with roaring trails of God scent. Either way, you were never truly anonymous. As twilight deepens into early night, the city hums with a different kind of energy. Children chase each other through the alleys. The last of the market stalls pack up their goods, and couples begin to gather under pergolas and fig trees for stolen moments of closeness. And here, perhaps more than anywhere else, scent becomes seduction. You make your way toward the riverside, not for prayer or business, but for pleasure. And pleasure in Egypt is never unscented. Perfume wasn't just about making yourself tolerable, it was about making yourself irresistible. There are papyrus love poems written more than 3,000 years ago that describe desire not by appearance, but by aroma. Lines like, "My lover comes near, and the fragrance of her skin is like honeyed wine," or, "His breath, sweeter than lotus, steals my senses." So, when you're preparing for an evening tryst, or maybe just hoping to catch someone's eye at a celebration, you reach for your most prized possession, your scented love balm. It's stored in a small alabaster jar, tightly sealed. Inside is a mixture of blue lotus oil, cinnamon, cardamom, and a touch of sweet almond oil. It's thick, warm, and when applied to your pulse points, it heats up, releasing waves of soft, spicy floral. You dab a little behind your ears, your wrists, your inner elbows, the spots where heartbeat and heat live. This isn't just for show. The Egyptians believed scent stimulated the blood, awakened the spirit, and, in the right quantities, could even stir the gods of love. A well-chosen perfume could change your fate. A poorly chosen one could doom you to eternal solitude. No pressure. Historians still argue about the extent to which perfumes were used as intentional aphrodisiacs or simply as social norms, but we do know that some ingredients, like blue lotus and cinnamon, were repeatedly associated with passion and attraction in literature, art, and even religious ceremony. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some elite households, matchmaking involved a scent test. Before couples met face to face, their scented linens or personal oils were swapped. If the smell was pleasing, the courtship could proceed. If not, back to the date palm fields. You pass a couple sitting by the water's edge, their heads bowed together, and catch the subtle trace of frankincense and sweet basil. A good blend, earthy and clean, with a touch of mystery. They've chosen well. Nearby, an older woman hums while braiding flowers into a garland. You notice she's crushing petals of jasmine and sweet flag between her fingers, rubbing the oil into her neck. Not just decorative. This is ritual. This is how you tell the world, I am still alive. I am still beautiful. I still matter. You've heard stories, half gossip, half truth, of women rubbing scented oils on their inner thighs before bed, believing that the fragrance would summon dreams of lovers. Some used mandrake root, soaked in wine, and rubbed behind the knees. Risky, but romantic. And it wasn't just women. Men, too, cultivated their scent. A well-oiled man who smelled of cedar and roasted myrrh, irresistible. A man who smelled of fish, dust, and regret, good luck. You pause by the river, letting the wind cool your skin, the balm on your neck, has melted into your pores. You smell sweet, spiced, curious, and somewhere nearby, someone notices. That's the thing about scent in ancient Egypt. It wasn't just passive, it was participatory. You weren't just wearing perfume, you were casting a spell, calling someone in, whispering without speaking. And when the person you were hoping to see finally appears at the bend in the path, their smile tells you what you already knew. They smelled you before they saw you. Night in Egypt isn't silent, even after the market stalls shut, even after the priests close the temple gates. The streets buzz with life, quiet footsteps on sandstone, low conversations over bowls of lentils, distant laughter carried by the wind. But tonight, something else hums just beneath it all. Commerce. The kind that doesn't involve grains or goats, but scent. You wander down a narrow lane toward the artisan quarter, where a glow still spills from one open doorway. Inside, the perfumers. This isn't a shop. Not exactly. It's more like a laboratory and a shrine and a closet rolled into one. Shelves hold ceramic jars, woven sachets, twisted roots, and piles of dried petals. A man stands over a small brazier, stirring something thick and golden in a copper pan. It smells like clove, myrrh, and something deeper, like tree sap melting into firelight. He glances up, doesn't greet you, just gestures to the back, where smaller jars are lined up in rows, like obedient soldiers. This is the real stuff. This is the industry of smell. Perfume in Egypt wasn't just a luxury product. It was an economic engine. Entire towns, like Mendes and Heliopolis, specialized in producing specific fragrance blends, and the recipes, often guarded like state secrets, passed from master to apprentice, sometimes written in code, sometimes not written at all. Historians still argue whether these perfumers were considered lowly craftsmen or high-level alchemists, but when you see the reverence with which the vendor handles his oils, you know the truth lies somewhere in between. These weren't just businessmen. They were part pharmacist, part priest, part magician. You pick up a jar labeled Dream Binder. The vendor says nothing, but nods. You unseal it, and the smell hits instantly. Rose, honey, frankincense, and bitter almond. The kind of scent that makes your heart slow and your eyes close. You don't even ask the price. You just set down your coin. In this world, there are blenders and there are weavers. Some perfumers know the ingredients. Others understand the feeling. The best do both. They don't just mask odor. They curate memory. Here's a quirky tidbit. One of the oldest known scent factories was discovered at a site near the Red Sea. Dozens of mixing bowls, charred resins, and clay molds showed that this wasn't a boutique. It was mass production, with trade routes reaching as far as Nubia, Canaan, and the Mediterranean Isles. You think of how many hands must have passed those scents along. Laborers harvesting myrrh, sailors ferrying cedar oil across sea foam, merchants trading jars for grain, nobles storing them in stone vaults. And now, one in your palm, you turn to watch the perfumer pour a new blend into a narrow-necked bottle. It's heated fat, maybe tallow, mixed with powdered cinnamon and date syrup. For a moment, the air feels heavy, not in a bad way, in a way that tells you this scent will linger. He dips a reed into the oil and daubs it on his wrist, then holds it near your face. You smell smoke, sweetness, and something like sun-warmed wood. It's not showy, but it's confident. The scent of someone who knows who they are. And isn't that the whole point? You purchase a small vial, wrap it in linen, and tuck it into your satchel. Not because you need it tonight, but because smelling good tomorrow starts now. As you leave the shop, the breeze picks up. You pass someone in the alley, and they glance toward you, not because of how you look, but because of what you carry. Not the coin, not the jar, the aura. Because in ancient Egypt, perfume wasn't a product. It was identity in liquid form. By the time the moon rises fully above the city walls, bathing the Nile in silver, you're strolling past the outer gardens of a noble estate, your satchel heavier with scent jars, and your body still faintly glowing from the oils applied earlier. And as you move through the shadowed walkways, you start to notice something strange, subtle, yet unmistakable. Everyone smells different. The guard at the gate, sharp and smoky, like cloves and charcoal. The servant tending the lamp flames, faintly floral, with a trace of lemon balm. A passing scribe, bitter with myrrh and just a hint of sweat and ink. And then it hits you. Smell is stratified, structured, even coded. In ancient Egypt, how you smelled wasn't just about what you could afford. It was who you were, your class, your gender, your occupation, and even your mood could all be deciphered by the aroma that clung to your skin. The elite, they smelled rich, literally. Their fragrances were layered, complex, and often overwhelming. You remember one banquet you once helped serve. The women shimmered with lotus-infused beeswax. The men reeked, in a good way, of cinnamon, cypress, and rare resins from far-off lands. Their scent lingered in the cushions long after the party ended, and in your memory, even longer. Meanwhile, the working class had to get creative. You, for example, often layered inexpensive herbs and oils. Moringa, thyme, lemongrass. When the sun hit just right, they gave off a light, clean scent. Not enough to stop a donkey in its tracks, but enough to stand near someone in conversation without offense. Gender also played a role. Women were often associated with softer, sweeter scents. Lotus, rose, honey. Men leaned toward spice, wood, and smoke. But this wasn't universal. Certain priestesses were known for their sharp, resin-heavy fragrances, while some male scribes dabbled in sweeter blends meant to evoke divine favor. Historians still argue whether these scent assignments were rigid rules or flexible customs, but surviving jars and inscriptions suggest a clear pattern of perfume profiling. To smell wrong could mean social embarrassment, or worse, offending the wrong deity on the wrong day. You pass a group of musicians on a terrace. They're tuning lyres and sipping wine. Each of them wears fragrance beads woven into their hair, tiny nodules of hardened resin and crushed petals. One shifts, and you catch a waft of blue lotus and wine-soaked figs. It's festive. It's intentional. It tells you they're here to entertain and to enchant. Here's a quirky detail. Some Egyptians assigned scent nicknames to one another. Instead of sweetheart or sunshine, they'd say things like, my little marjoram pod, or you smell like spring kaifi. Romantic? Yes. Also slightly weird. You once knew a potter who always smelled like hot clay and dried mint. His wife called him my kiln blossom. Strange at first, but unforgettable. You think about your own scent now, how it's evolved over the day. Morning moringa, midday mint and resin, evening sweetness from that perfume jar you picked up. You've worn 3 different faces in scent alone, and yet you're still you. That's the thing about smell. It's not just decoration, it's declaration. You pause beneath a fig tree, press your fingers to your wrist, and inhale the final notes of your oil blend. Soft, smoky, calm. You might not be the richest. You might not have sandalwood from Punt or civet musk reserved for queens, but you carry yourself in scent like a scholar carries scrolls, with purpose, because in Egypt, people might forget your name, but they'll never forget how you smelled. You're nearly home again, weaving through the hushed stillness of nighttime streets, when a breeze brushes past you, cool, unexpected, and tinged with something you can't quite place. Aphrodisiac herbs, burned resin, maybe even a spell. You glance around. A narrow door creaks open. A woman in a long, translucent linen robe steps out into the moonlight, her eyes sharp, her scent sharper. She's holding a small vial tied to her waist with papyrus cord, and you know instantly this is someone who dabbles in more than just daily deodorant. She's a perfumer of emotions, a maker of potions, a conjurer of scent-based sorcery, because in ancient Egypt, fragrance wasn't only hygiene or fashion, it was enchantment. You've heard the rumors, how a drop of the right perfume could make a rival fall silent, how a garland soaked in a secret blend might cause a person to dream of you. There were even formulas etched into the walls of the House of Life, temples where priests mixed oils for healing and magic alike. You pause at the doorway. Inside, the room glows with lamplight. Tiny bowls of resin sit warming on ceramic trays. Bundles of herbs hang from the ceiling, drying. There's a scroll open on the table. Not religious, not medicinal, romantic. The woman doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. She dips a reed into one of her mixtures and hands it to you without a word. You lift it to your wrist and inhale jasmine, henna, crushed date, blossoms, and something metallic and bitter. Mandrake? This is not casual. This is not friendly. This is the kind of perfume you wear when you want someone to think of nothing but you for days. Historians still argue how widely used these so-called love potions were. Were they everyday tools of flirtation or rare, ritual-only recipes? The truth is probably both. Some were worn openly at banquets, others whispered between palm leaves in back alleys, and some were dangerous. Mandrake root could cause hallucinations after all. Here's a quirky tidbit. There's a recorded spell in an ancient love scroll where a woman grinds up myrrh, honey, and crocodile tail ash, blends it with wine, and anoints her doorframe, believing it will lure her beloved to knock within 3 nights. Honestly, if it works, who are we to judge? You remember hearing about a noblewoman who bathed in rose water and fermented wine before greeting a suitor. He was seen wandering the district 2 days later, barefoot and dazed, saying she smelled like the first morning of the world. Were these stories exaggerated? Definitely. But the power of scent in matters of the heart was real. Egyptians believed emotions had smells: fear, desire, anger, devotion. To control the scent was to guide the emotion. You hand the reed back, nodding in silent thanks. The woman watches you leave, her eyes gleaming in the lamplight. Her fragrance follows you for a while, lingering in your hair, clinging to your fingertips, threading through your thoughts like a dream you don't want to wake from. And as you walk through the now quiet city, the river whispering beside you, you realize you've smelled love, fear, power, hunger, joy, all without a single word. Perfume in this world was never just perfume. It was language, sometimes seductive, sometimes dangerous, always unforgettable. And tonight, as your own blend of oils, herbs, and mystery rises with the heat of your skin, you smile, because if scent is spellwork, then you, friend, are a walking enchantment. The stars are high now, bright, unwavering, and somehow closer than they were just hours ago. You're home again. The reed door creaks softly as you shut it behind you. Inside, the world is dim and quiet. Your mat is still warm from the day's sun, and the scent of your pillow, faint blue lotus and chamomile, welcomes you back like an old friend. You lower yourself slowly, the balm on your skin having melted into a memory of warmth and effort. Everything about you, from head to toe, carries a trace of today's journey. Crushed mint, sacred resin, marjoram paste, river water, kitchen herbs, sandalwood smoke, and something else, something uniquely you. This isn't a perfume you could bottle. It's a living scent, a scent made by choices. Because in Egypt, you didn't just wear fragrance, you lived it. You lie down, adjusting your wrap, feeling the last flicker of sweat cooling against your temple. Outside, a dog barks once, a pot clinks in the distance, and above it all, the perfume of the city rises: Nile water and dust, cooking oil and lemon balm, sweat and sandalwood. It's imperfect, layered, real, like the people who wear it. Historians still argue what ancient Egypt truly smelled like. The tombs tell one story, the scrolls another. But the truth, it's a mix, an orchestra of function and faith, of necessity and pride, of rituals passed from mother to daughter, apprentice to master, lover to beloved, a world where the body was a vessel of gods, and every drop of sweat or dab of oil was part of that holiness. Here's a final quirky detail. Archaeologists once found a tomb inscription that read simply, "May he always smell of lilies," not wealth, not victory, lilies. Because even in death, scent was worth wishing for. You curl onto your side now, limbs heavy, heart full. Your fingers still carry a hint of that temple blend, frankincense and something unplaceable. You breathe it in. You don't even need to think. Your body remembers. Because this isn't about hiding your humanity. It's about honoring it. You smell like someone who lived today, who sweat and scrubbed and oiled and laughed. Someone who cared enough to wake and say, "Yes, let me smell like the best version of myself. And tomorrow, you'll begin again." And now, with your body stretched out beneath linen and moonlight, let's drift. The scents around you are no longer bright. They've softened, melting into the fabric of the evening like candle wax pooling in a dish. The lotus has dulled to a whisper. The moringa balm is a memory on your skin. Even the mint on your breath has faded to something faint and ghostly. Let it all fade with you. Imagine the Nile outside your door, flowing slow and steady, its waters thick with the dreams of fishermen and farmers, priests and perfumers. Imagine those dreams mixing in the night air, carried on the breeze, scentless but full of story. They pass through open windows and papyrus curtains, settling like dust on every soul. Now imagine yours. Today, you've walked through markets and temples, past tombs and lovers, through oils and herbs and rituals. You've listened to your body and learned its language. You've dressed your skin with intention. You've claimed your place in a world where scent was history. And here, in the hush of your room, you are surrounded by the quiet power of that history. You are clean. You are still. You are home. Let your thoughts slow. Let the images blur. Let your body sink into the mat and your mind wander far beyond the reeds and shadows. There is nothing left to do tonight. No one to impress. No ritual unperformed. Just sleep. Sweet, scented sleep. The stars are high now, bright, unwavering, and somehow closer than they were just hours ago. You're home again. The reed door creaks softly as you shut it behind you. Inside, the world is dim and quiet. Your mat is still warm from the day's sun, and the scent of your pillow, faint blue lotus and chamomile, welcomes you back like an old friend. You lower yourself slowly, the balm on your skin having melted into a memory of warmth and effort. Everything about you, from head to toe, carries a trace of today's journey. Crushed mint, sacred resin, marjoram paste, river water, kitchen herbs, sandalwood smoke, and something else. Something uniquely you. This isn't a perfume you could bottle. It's a living scent. A scent made by choices. Because in Egypt, you didn't just wear fragrance. You lived it. You lie down, adjusting your wrap, feeling the last flicker of sweat cooling against your temple. Outside, a dog barks once. A pot clinks in the distance, and above it all, the perfume of the city rises, Nile water and dust, cooking oil and lemon balm, sweat and sandalwood. It's imperfect, layered, real, like the people who wear it. Historians still argue what ancient Egypt truly smelled like. The tombs tell one story, the scrolls another. But the truth, it's a mix, an orchestra of function and faith, of necessity and pride, of rituals passed from mother to daughter, apprentice to master, lover to beloved, a world where the body was a vessel of gods, and every drop of sweat or dab of oil was part of that holiness. Here's a final quirky detail. Archaeologists once found a tomb inscription that read simply, "May he always smell of lilies, not wealth, not victory, lilies." Because even in death, scent was worth wishing for. You curl onto your side now, limbs heavy, heart full. Your fingers still carry a hint of that temple blend, frankincense and something unplaceable. You breathe it in. You don't even need to